Good morning, and I'm good. Greetings to you, but I'm also interested in this ongoing.
Okay,
let him do it, and then we'll continue with another.
Not an opinion, but factual basis based on faith.
Wait, okay. I mean, before you continue, we have to tell listeners who you are. So Ameenu Shardow is general manager of Dreams, he's Black Stars team manager, and a member of the Ghana Football Association. I hope I got the three right.
Yes, you got it right.
Wonderful. So now
Ameenu is a big man. Oh.
Yeah, Ameenu is a big man.
I think we must admit ourselves to certain provisions that FIFA calls the entrenched positions.
Yeah.
There are certain provisions in FIFA regulations that associations or people who play organized football don't have the discretion to alter or decide not to apply them. You have to apply them. And unfortunately, this regulation is one of such provisions. You don't have the discretion not to apply them. They are entrenched positions of FIFA. So I think that alone settles the whole argument around this thing. So this LG, whilst I see the attempt to equate this regulation to the campaign by people in English to promote this LGBTQ thing. But unfortunately, that is not part of the entrenched positions or entrenched regulations of FIFA. And even with that, you realize that the FA in England, if you read widely about it, they don't charge players who refuse to don this because it's not entrenched position.
Yeah.
But they know when the players eventually take it to CAS or even higher body, they stand the risk of getting the regulation. So they only urge them, and in some instances even incentivize them with some largesse for them to don it. So I think this debate, we should settle it once and for all. We don't have the discretion to say that we will not apply them. Once it's imported, you are mandated to apply them.
Yeah, I think across the table we all agree that the law has to be applied in terms of people shouldn't do what they should do and what they shouldn't do. My argument is that, for example, right, looking at even the finances, the economic terrain of the Ghana Premier League, I don't understand why a player is fined 500 cedis for a religious inscription. Whereas in places like England, for example, Cody Gakpo was giving a caution. You get what I mean? Yeah, so I think a caution could suffice. But as 500 cedi fine, if you ask me, I thought it was a little over the top. But that's the law, so we have to respect it.
Some will also probably argue that it's even too small.
Yes, Raymond Yamado thinks that 1,000 cedi fine is not even enough. He even wants a bigger amount slapped on the player.
I'll give you an example. When we participated in the CAF Confederation Cup, amongst the regulations, the entering regulations was about equipment and the inscriptions on equipment, which has to do with sponsors and all that thing. I think in our first game, they had an experience of Dreams FC in the African campaign. In the first game we played away, the group game against Club African in Tunisia, we put on our usual training kits, which had a particular sponsor which infringing on CAF regulations. We got a letter. The fine was $25,000. $25,000. One will argue for such a minor infraction, why don't you just tamper and the fact that this is a new club, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. For $25,000, we have to pay. So yes, I think it's maybe what probably we should push for is to codify it in a certain amount and make it mandatory that once you flout this, usually our regulations gives discretion to the disciplinary committee to the severity of the punishment. They will sit and then they will weigh the severity of the offense and then prefer, in their opinion, the requisite sanctions. What we've not done is that when you do this is the fine that goes with it. This is the fine that goes with it. The exact fine. It's left with the discretion. But I think 500 cedis is okay. Honestly, I'll get the point. I appreciate the point you're making. But a club like Nations and these things, well.
Anyway,
but I think it's okay. I think it's okay.
Okay. Anyway, that's an interesting side conversation. Let's talk about the main thing. We brought you on to talk about the under 20s who went to Egypt. I don't, Ray. What is it?
You see, to situate the conversation well.
Aminu's post was a very long one.
Yes, I can read it. Yeah, I can read
Okay,
it.
you know what?
You see,
Let's proceed. So basically, Aminu, so you have three issues. Okay, so you say that. Okay, first of all, let me take your impressions of what we all saw in Egypt, and then we get into your like divergent opinions and where you disagree with people's assessment of the team.
For me, I think it's very, very disappointing that we didn't make the World Cup. I think the team was good enough to, at the very least, make the World Cup. I think that's how far my assessment will go. I don't belong to the school of thought that this team was rubbish, as some people might call it, or say this team lacks cohesion and so forth and so on. And the issues, all the side issues that we are bringing into the equation. I think at the very least, this team was good enough to make the World Cup, and it's very, very unfortunate that we didn't meet that minimum target.
What do you think went wrong with the trip to Egypt?
I think certain critical decisions that were made in constructing the team didn't help us well. I mean, when the team plays football, from the onset, we know clearly that we had issues and issues putting the ball at the back of the net, and that was one thing that ran through our participation. And I don't think we did enough to address these issues, especially with and one thing that our reference always is. I understand the reason why we'll be flying a player like Jerry Free in and out of Spain to Egypt to help the team because of how important it is to the team. But I think, on hindsight, perhaps we could have found a better way to manage that situation and not put a player in such a position where we will not get the best, because clearly we didn't get the best out of him. He wasn't too focused. He looked tired when he was playing, and clearly we didn't get the best out of him. If we had qualified, we think scoring probably the winner, then would have said here that maybe that decision had paid off. But once we didn't meet the minimum target, we can look at all this to say perhaps we could have handled the issues better.
I see. There are lots of people who think that overall the squad we took to Egypt could have had options. You mentioned Jerry Free, for example. Some people will say, was he the only source of goals we should have taken to Egypt? Why didn't we look at other options? You also mentioned defense and issues in defense and all of that. When it comes to the options we took, should we have looked wider? Were there other options we could have brought into the team to have given us a better shot at qualifying for the World Cup? Or this was the best we could put together for the under-20 AFCON?
If you look at the specific issues about striking and defense, and then the answer I always give is in the form of a question: who are the alternatives that you think perhaps if we had brought in would have been better? I think once we start identifying these alternatives, then we'll be progressing the discussion. But to make a general statement by saying that we should have cast our net wider to include who?
That's what I'm asking. Could we have done that, or should we have done that?
But because on the top of my mind, I can't readily, put out names of people or players who perhaps would have who would have helped us than that. But
SportyFM, the voice of sports.
You could help the discussion with it. But the other point also is that you recall that the two key players didn't join the team. So we're short of two players. That's Anabuachi, a defender who could help the team, Clayton Dodu, who could have helped the team going forward because it didn't quite well in Cyprus. So you see, certain calculations that went against us. We listed, and I'm sure in naming the final squad, they took all these things into consideration and they were perhaps giving some assurances that these players will join the team.
Okay, so what happened to Nana Boakye and Clinton, and why couldn't they join?
I don't know. I have not taken the pain to ask, but I'm sure once the team returns, we'll be engaging more and then we'll find out what actually went on. But clearly, these two players could have impacted the team positively if they had been with the team. And it also brings to the into sharp focus again the decisions or the considerations that went into making a decision to even list them in the team. So if we're not going to have these two players, then perhaps we should have looked elsewhere and see players who were available and could have helped our cause. But like I said, I don't on the top of my head, I can't really name names. Maybe Kelvin and Raymond could help us by calling out certain players who in certain positions could have helped the squad. But I think by and large, the biggest disappointment, and I feel this pain throughout because we are overly reliant on competitions to help develop our players, and because we are reliant on these competitions, when we don't make them, it becomes a big miss for us. And for me, I think perhaps we should be looking at ways of developing our players without being heavily reliant on qualifying on competitions to help aid their development.
I'm happy you are making this point. I think that you are, and thank God you are in a position where you can have conversations with the powers that be, because it's also a big concern a lot of us have that once we don't make a competition, we are quick to move players on and try to figure out how we can build the next team without thinking about how to progress players on and see what happens to their development. So I'm happy you are mentioning this. But the other issue that you raised, and I've seen your Facebook post, you talk about people's comments on the evolution of the squad from the Africa Games to Wafubi and to the World Cup. Some people have pointed out changes in the team. Some people say lots of changes were made. You disagree. And if I remember the number you cited in your post, you mentioned that 10 players, I believe I'm correct, right? 10 players made their way through from the beginning of the process to the end. Am I correct, Ameenu?
I don't readily recall I put 10 players, but what in my casual observation, what was clear was that there was a running team of a core group that was running through the squads that this one has taken to the WAFU tournament, the African Games, and at this AFCON. There was a very core group that ran through. So I disagree. In fact, yesterday I had cause to even have a long-standing argument with Raymond, and I was disagreeing with some of the analysis that were put out that the team was entirely changed for the AFCON, and we brought Burgess. Forgetting that these Burgess, in fact, I think about 90% of the Burgess that we experienced were the team Desmond took to the WAFU competitions.
Okay, just a second. For our listeners who might not be too familiar with the term Burgess, so I'm just referring to the foreign-based players, just for context, for those who may wonder what we are talking about. Yeah.
The likes of, Mafo, Jerry Free himself, Estelle, all these players came to the fore when Desmond was using them for the WAFU and African Games, and because they were exposed at a tournament level, they got deals and they went abroad. Aziz Issa himself, they went abroad. So during this period, you realize that Desmond clearly was determined to keep a certain group, a certain core throughout his squad. And I think he achieved it largely with this squad at under 20. So if we are looking for reasons why the team didn't make the minimum target of going to the World Cup, it shouldn't be that the team lacked consistency or the team was changed to favor unknown people, foreign-based players. It wasn't the case at all.
I see. Raymond is here. He says he has a question for you.
You see,
I'm surprised if he didn't.
Well, Ameenu, part of the reasons why we've been critical of the squad has been the consistent chopping and changing of the squad. And that in itself, we believe, affected team chemistry, team cohesion. Because we've seen the team progressed from the African Games to WAFU through to the AFCON, certain players had to be introduced last minute, and that clearly affected team chemistry and all. But you seem to disagree with us per your Facebook post, claiming that there has been a core team that the coach has managed to keep all through these stages, and this core team should have propelled us to do more or even have a much more better squad than we saw at this tournament. Do you still stand by that position? Having looked at the squad very well and looked at the inclusions and the exclusions and all, do you still stand by that position?
It's not the question of standing by my position. These are facts. The squads that this want to have used throughout the WAFU and the African Games are public knowledge. They are out there. So if you endorse, you can even do an exercise by looking at these three squads and look, and you come to the conclusion that there is a certain core group that runs through. These are facts. So it's not about standing by. If you yourself, you do this exercise, you come by that conclusion.
Ameenu, when we look at the goalkeeping department, for example, at the African Games, Gideon Esiaku was not the goalkeeper. Mm-hmm. At the WAFU tournament, Gideon Esiaku was not goalkeeper. He was not even part of that team. He was introduced at the AFCON tournament last hour.
SportyFM.
Okay.
Again,
this is where you are wrong. I'm happy we are going by specific.
Yes, so let's deal with them specifically.
Esiaku has always been part of the U20. He wasn't selected for the AFCON, for the WAFU, and for the African Games, because at that point he wasn't in good form. If you recall, at that time Dreams was playing the Confederation Cup. I'm very, very involved because I know the dealings of this. I follow these things very well. We just started with Dreams during the Confederation Cup, the qualifying stage. Then he lost form, and then he ceded his position to Solomon Agbesi. So at that point in time, he didn't have any justification to be in the team. And that's why I agree. If you look closely, Desmond has been very, very consistent, especially when it comes to the goalkeeping department. He was choosing players based on form. And so Gideon was part of their camping process. He's always been part of the team. He was dropped for the tournament because at that point in time, there was no justification for him to even be in the squad because he wasn't keeping our dreams. Let's go to the next one.
Now, we are looking at, let's look at the team itself.
The voice of sport.
From the African Games to the WAFU tournament, 11 players were dropped from that team that won the African Games. 11 players were dropped for the WAFU Zone B tournament.
Who are these? Let's go through because I'm very close to the team, so I know exactly what happened.
You know exactly what happened. So
Ray, for context, just mention.
Yeah. So let me get into the 11.
Okay.
Two goalkeepers, Vincent Anani and Daniel Afo, were dropped. Aaron Esel was not part of the team that went to the WAFU. He returned for this tournament.
Mm-hmm. No. Aaron Esel was part of the African Games squad.
But he did not go to WAFU. He did not go to the WAFU Zone B tournament.
Okay, he was part of the African Games squad, though.
Yes.
The WAFU tournament preceded the African Games.
I'm talking about the 11 players who were dropped from the African Games winning squad. Mm-hmm. Yes. Now we move on to the next one. There was a certain...
Aaron Esel was not part of the African Games squad.
He was not part... He was part of the African Games, but he was dropped for the WAFU.
No, but the WAFU came before the African Games.
No. It was the African Games before WAFU.
I think African Games first, and then WAFU, and then the under 20.
Yeah. Yes.
The AFCON, yes. I think that's the order.
Actually led to the
okay.
Yes.
You see,
I'm taking my time. You see, I want us to do. You see, yesterday you accused us of being intellectually dishonest. Now I want us to do the exercise on air so that Ghanaians will understand that we are not being biased. So I'm taking you through the squad one by one.
Yes, I'm helping you. I'm helping you. I'm really helping you.
Okay.
It's up to African Games.
Yes.
And then left to join a team in Europe. You know very well that for the WAFU, you will not have these players for the WAFU. Isn't that the case?
Me, I'm not aware.
You are very much aware. You are very much aware. I know. Don't try to fall in on your own sword to be intellectually dishonest.
No. So
once he was exposed at the African Games, he moved out. It was always going to be difficult to have him for the WAFU. Okay. So that's clearly the explanation.
Okay, so Aaron Esel's case is that he left. He went to Europe.
Okay.
Yes, and we know this.
Okay, fair point. That's out.
There was
Let's
a certain, remember, Adumaku.
Okay.
And then there was Nana Kwame Boachi.
Okay.
He also did not make it to AFCON. The Wafu.
No,
he did
no.
not make it to
The
AFCON.
player-
He returned for the AFCON.
No, he was a player just like Kentin Dodu, whom were elected on the squad to join the AFCON.
Yes.
But for some reasons, which I already explained, they don't join the team. So he was part of the team.
There was
also. Yes, David Amuzu is injured.
David Amuzu is injured. Okay. There's Emmanuel Annor.
Emmanuel Annor is out of the age bracket.
Nathan, we'll come to that. We'll come to that. We'll come to that.
Okay. I mean, we have a question on players falling out of the age bracket, but let's finish with this,
Yes.
and then we can deal with that.
And then
Thank you.
Aziz Issa played at the African Games, but missed out on the Wafu Zone B tournament.
For the same reason. Look at the timelines. Look at when he moved outside Ghana.
Frederick Kessie was also dropped for the Wafu tournament.
I don't know Freddie Kessie, honestly. I don't know. So
And there's Michael Efson, who was also dropped.
Samatex boy. I think we should check his age.
Age bracket.
Age bracket. Okay. Then between the under 20 tournament that was hosted in Togo, the Wafu tournament, and the tournament in Egypt,
Yeah.
12 players did not make it.
Yeah.
12 players did not make it from that Wafu squad to the AFCON squad in Egypt. Should I go over the names?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, very well. So there's goalkeeper Chum. Okay, just a minute. Benjamin Chum. He was dropped.
Who is with Kotoko now, isn't it?
Yes, he was our young apostles then. Yes, now we're
Yes.
Kotoko.
He was doing very well at Young Apostles.
Yes, he was dropped.
And just like I explained to you with the Gideon situation, Gideon started the Confederation Cup qualifying series with him. So he was doing well, and then he lost his position to Solomon Agbesi. Just not being consistent with selection of keeping players, especially in the goalkeeping department, who are regularly playing and on form. I think it's the same thing that happened too.
But it would interest you to know that Said Yakubu of Midiama played in all three squads, but was not considered number one for the AFCON tournament.
Yeah, but you when you are building a squad, if you are the coach, will you prefer to take players, or especially in the goalkeeping department, all your players very, very good, highly talented, but are not in form, or they are not keeping even for you to even judge whether they are in form or not? Will you do that?
No, but Said Yakubu was at the African Games, was at Wafu, and again you pick them up for the AFCON tournament only for Gideon Sisiaku to take the post.
Because Gideon's, and we all know this, you can check the records of Gideon's and check his form. If you were the coach, you would do the same thing.
Okay.
I have no doubt about that. Absolutely no.
Let's continue. We have the 12 players here. There was Richard Tete of Dreams FC. Injured. Edwin Kufo Asamoah, the captain.
I don't know what happened with him.
Okay. Then there was Mohaison Mahmoud.
Injured.
Kelvin Nkrumah.
Okay, Kevin Nkrumah, I think is the one outlier. I think is the one person that I agree with Kelvin that I think he's good enough to have made the squad. Why did he make? I think I will engage more. Honestly, I have seen him. I think he would have given.
He would have been a very good addition to the team.
I think so. I sincerely believe so. So this is something that I would have to again engage to find out the reason why.
All right.
Dennis Apia Kubi also missed out.
I think you need to check on his age.
Okay.
I think we need to check on that also.
Labaran Alidu, Vision FC.
Injured. We don't know. Labaran, very, very good player. I think he's a player we're all looking up to see in this tournament. He got a very bad, I think, a knee injury, and he's still been out.
Prince Menu, Baladom, Pinap FC. You don't know?
I don't know.
Okay. Benab. Okay, very well. There's Collins Boa, Dreams FC. Injured.
A knee injury.
Okay. Mustafa Abu.
I don't know.
Desmond Tete.
Desmond Tete with Tema United, I believe.
Yes, Tema United. Injured.
Yes, he's injured.
Alasan.
I don't know this Alasan. I know one Alasan, but he's not the same Alasan.
So these 12 players played at the Wafu Zone B tournament. No,
you realize that out of the 12 players, about 6 or 7 of them are out due to injuries.
Okay.
You realize that. So you see,
no.
If you are an ardent follower of, and I took my time a lot to follow this under 20 team a lot. It was clear for me from the onset that Desmond was very, very determined to keep a certain call.
Okay.
It was very, very clear. And the only way you couldn't have made the call, in my opinion, or to have made the tournament, in my opinion, is if, for instance, you were injured or you were not playing for him to even assess your level of, your form at that point in time.
And finally, the official squad for AFCON under 20 tournament in Egypt. There were 10 new additions, 10 new names. Let me put it that way. 10 new names. Gideon Sesiaku.
I have explained to you that
But
when you say
I'm taking you through the 10 new names. Because these are players who are not part of the Wafu Zone B.
Raymond, if you say new, hold on. I just want to understand. Raymond, if you say new, new in the context of
these players did not play in the African games.
So they didn't play in the African games.
Wafu Zone B.
They
were
didn't
not
play
there.
Wafu B.
Yes.
And then in the final squad for the under 20 AFCON,
we saw their names there.
Okay.
So let me take you through the names.
I get what Raymond is trying to.
No, let me take you through the names. You see,
hold on, Raymond, hold on, please. We are doing it together. Don't worry.
We are doing it. Yeah, I'm taking my time.
What I always try to encourage people to have their minds to, especially for those who have followed this activity carefully. There were players who were consistently dropped from the Wafu, from the All African Games, and it's not as if they are just emerging.
Okay.
Some of the players have been with the team throughout, and Gideon Sesiaku is one classical example. He was dropped for both tournaments, and I agree with him being dropped because at that point in time, he was not even keeping. So there was no justification to even keep him in the team.
Okay.
So if you say new, I think we need to provide the context properly.
Okay.
If you identify the player, because there are players who were in and around the team. So the 10 quote and unquote new that you are going to call, you realize that I'm very, very certain that a chunk of them were in and around the team throughout this process of all African games and then Wafu qualifiers.
Okay. So let me correct my English. The official squad list for the tournament in Egypt had 10 names we had not seen on previous squad lists. Would that be fair?
Right.
Very well. Gideon Sesiaku, Patrick Atta, goalkeeper for Nsuapon Fidelity, Kelvin Ahiable, Dreams FC, Ismail Ado, Heart of Lions, Joseph Edu, and Joseph Edu was one of the Boga stars who was never part of the team. He plays for Santa Tatia. Then there's Ahmed Mahama, who plays for Nis Ibrahim. Lord Frifa, who plays for Stamgrass. He too had never appeared anywhere around the team. But suddenly we saw him on the final list. Joseph Opoku Amankwa, he plays for Waregem. Zouk Waregem. This one Nathan pronounce it well.
In Belgium, yeah.
Yes. There's George Nagaji, who plays for Vision. And then there's Clinton Dodu, who plays for Apollon Limassol. These are names we had never seen on any of the previous squad lists, but we suddenly saw them at the AFCON under-20 squad list in Egypt.
Yeah, off the top of my head, Gideos, Clinton Dodu, I think if you go, there was one other person I identified. They've been, just like the situation with Gideos, they've been part and parcel of this process from African Games, Wafu. They just didn't make the cut for this tournament. So it will be for me, it won't be proper to term them as new, as if they've not been part of the process. And then some of the players that you like Joseph and then one other Lord of FIFA, these are players who have been playing in Europe, who have been playing from a very young age. It was always going to be very, very difficult to have them even for this AFCON. it was very, very difficult. You had to negotiate. But for the fact that some of them have finished their season or were close to finishing their season, I'm not sure we will have such players. And one thing I also want us to understand, when a team is progressing, is going to tournaments, the higher the team goes, the more the likelihood of bringing on more players, because then the scope of talent pool is being broadened as the team goes through the qualification. And that's why you will not have the same team that plays in qualifiers, exactly the same team that plays in the tournament. You will not have such a situation. It will never happen here. And because as you go along, you get exposed to, quote and unquote, better, more exposed players who could help you achieve your set objective. But what is very, very clear, what if you look through the squad, you look at, I think 12 players clearly runs through. And these players constitute the core of the team. And that's the point I want us to drive home. These players constitute the core of the team. It's not as if throughout the process, the African games, the WAFU to the AFCON, we were chopping and changing the entire squad. In squad construction, if you're able to keep 50% of your team throughout, you're building that consistency that we are all yearning for. And that's by far, Desmond had achieved it.
Yeah, so having looked at all the squads, would we be fair in a criticism or observation post-tournament when we say the consistent introduction of new players and all along the way may have derailed team chemistry and derailed the progress of this team? Injuries, age cutoffs, and all of those things. Would it be fair to say all of these things affected the team one way or the other?
I wouldn't say it would be fair, because of course you wouldn't have Raymond as you are making analysis. I'm not sure you had the benefit to follow the under 20 team throughout this process, as I have espoused here. So you don't have the background of the players that I have had, because I had the privilege to be close to the team. And like I explained, you wouldn't have known that some of these...
Hold on. Because you kept the team away from us.
No, the team wasn't kept away from you. You didn't visit. I don't remember when you visited any of their training sessions, any of their friendly matches. Never. They played from Pram Pram. They played some in Legon, the Legon Stadium. They played some at the Accra Sports Stadium. There were journalists who were following the team.
I didn't see any journalists there.
No, they were.
I mean, Kelvin also followed great.
Anyway, when they were in Pram Pram, they didn't allow us to come.
No, that's when they are in camp. I mean, you are making your point. Please conclude.
Yeah, if you don't follow the team throughout the process, you come to conclusions that Raymond will conveniently arrive at, that we are dumping new players all of a sudden. So, and for me, that's the deficiency of the argument. If you follow the team a bit, you realize that some of the players who are even making the squad for the first time, in terms of being named in the squad for the tournament, have been part and parcel of the process. Fortunately or unfortunately, at one point in time, they were just not put in the squad for the tournament. So you won't be you'll be very, very unfair to come to that conclusion.
This is SportyFM.
Wow. Okay, but there's an issue of the age cutoff that I'm sure Nathan would want to get.
I wanted to find out this. You mentioned certain players fell out of the age, and all of that. I'm just curious. How is it that if the end game really was the under 20 tournament in Egypt? How did we get it wrong that in the planning process, we have players in camp who, by the end of the process, were going to fall out of the age range? How did we miss that? Because I take it these players were important players, but somehow we missed out because we couldn't just get our calendars right, and now they're falling out of the required age range.
Yes, a lot of things could have happened at that point in time. And I remember very clearly during the African games, when we paraded a player like Emmanuel Annor, I raised the same issue. The player, Emmanuel Annor, at that point in time was probably the best defensive midfielder we had in Ghana. He was balling on the African continent with Dreams FC. He was one of the best players. And so if he falls within that age bracket at that point in time, and he was about the best. And remember, there was a certain demand for us to win the African Games, if you remember. So I'm thinking in my mind, if you can have 90% of your squad within the age bracket and 10% of them who will not be, because there was not even any guarantee that you are going to make the AFCON in any case. So the moment. So you can make, in team construction, I believe you can make certain considerations and compromise in these situations. Insofar as they are not over 10% in the composition of the squad. And clearly, about 3 of them who fell out of the 8 bracket doesn't constitute 10% of the team construction. So it's something that I don't really subscribe to, especially if there are other alternatives who are better or are on the same level. But in that prevailing circumstance, I don't think that we had. So yes, I'll make such considerations.
Well, Kelvin Oswansa has a question. He followed the team closely.
Yeah.
Well, Shardow, from the conversations, especially the defense for Gideon Sesiakon, who is a goalkeeper, and his inclusion in the team was because he's come off form and he's been brilliant, in the Ghana Premier League for Dreams FC, and then you even take it back that he had some experience in Africa as well. Now, coming into this tournament, some players were so inactive, and as many as 26 minutes had they played, some virtually don't feature for their side and all that. How do you make justification for Gideon Sesiakon and then make a justification for these players who are also inactive, but they are brought into the team to come and play when we had followed the team and we had seen other players who had been part of the entire group, the likes of Chivanyo, Foster, Arafat, and the likes. There's this young striker from Wafa, Mohamed Yassin, who has joined Malmo FF. All these players were in the pool, which we think. So why the justification for Gideon, who was on form and had been included in the team, but those who are inactive have been also included in the squad? If you wanted to, have equal principles for the selection of the squad.
Yeah, I think I appreciate your point very well. But I see in building a team, you are looking at certain level of consistency and certain level of expertise that the players are bringing. And one name that comes to mind is Abdulaziz Issa. Abdulaziz Issa has not played at all at his club. And if we are to go by that principle that we set, then definitely he shouldn't have been in this squad. But you look at the player, for instance, Abdulaziz, who is he? Has he been part and parcel of the team? The answer is yes. Does he bring a certain level of expertise to the team? Which is true. He turned out to be one of our most impactful players. So if you have a situation like that, Kelvin, if you are the coach and you are seized with these facts, that this is a player who I started with from the WAFU. He went from the African Games where he was one of the best players. He went outside, and because of that, he wasn't part of the WAFU. But all of a sudden, he's not playing. But I know his skill set. I know he could be very impactful to the team, but he's not playing. What kind of decision will you make? I'm very, very sure you bring him because of the level of expertise and the fact that he's been part and parcel of what you've been doing. And in fact, during the tournament, he should, not to the best of his abilities, I must admit, but he should. So it's a bit of a dilemma. You can't keep, in squad construction again, you can't keep one rule throughout. You need to make considerations based on the player, based on the department he's playing. You weigh it against the alternatives that could be, and then make a decision. And in this particular instance, I think this won't be the right decision.
Well, yes, I understand. And I think that all these considerations without a firm principle actually tampered with the chemistry and the telepathy of the team, that even preparations was hampered because we were looking forward to these players who were not even part of the final 2 weeks preparations. They just got into the team about a week to the tournament, and it affected us. And I think at junior level football, we don't have overarching players. Even at the senior national team in recent times, players who are on form are brought. You ignore the what we call the core. It's the reason why we've had successes in all the times that we've played at international tournaments.
I appreciate your point. And in fact, the ideal situation was to have your players all with you, and then you train with them. That would have been the ideal situation. But you see, things that happened in the past, increasingly it's becoming extremely difficult for us to keep hold of our young players. In fact, the best of young talents are going by the day. So what it means that things or conditions that prevailed in the past, say in 2009 when we were successful, where a lot of the players were locally, if you put that same situation now, you will not have all your players because the best of players are living by the day. So it's becoming increasingly difficult to keep your squad together over a period of time. It's even more difficult when the competition is being played outside the FIFA dates. Then it becomes extremely difficult to even have your players. So even in as much as I agree with your point that their preparations were hampered because some of these players were not even part of the final training leg for the competition. But it's a situation you have to deal with. And for the mere fact that these players have been part and parcel of the process throughout, I will always make the consideration. In fact, if going to a tournament like this with the expectation of making, at the very least, the World Cup stage, I would like to bring players that I've worked with before. I know them. I know what they can bring. And already there's some sort of cohesion that has been built before. So bringing them back in, even though it's last minute, it's not ideal, but I see the sense in that rather than bring in ones that are present, yes, but have not been part of the process with you. So he found himself in a very, very difficult situation. And I think all of us must appreciate the challenges that this team has faced relative to the availability of players. And clearly, and I keep making this point, it was clear, if you look through the squad, the intent was very, very clear from this one, is technical team, to keep a certain core. To a large extent, they achieved this. And to a large extent, they achieved a brand of football that all of us knew was going somewhere. Unfortunately, it just didn't make the minimum target.
All right, Ameenu, please hold the line for me. Our colleague, Godfred Akotobuafo, is joining us. He also has a few comments. I don't know if he has some questions, though. Godfred, if you can hear me, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure it's morning where you are, so good morning. How are you doing?
I can call it morning, but good morning.
Anyway, it's been a while.
It's good to hear your voice, Nathan. Good to hear my brother Ameenu Shardow's voice.
Yes,
as well.
It's nice to hear.
Good morning to Raymond.
Great. It's nice to hear from you too. I'm sure you have questions or comments on the under-20. You are a keen follower of the team as well. What do you make of everything that's happened and some of the explanations offered by Ameenu in terms of like the team performance and everything that's happened?
Well, I agree largely with some of the things that Ameenu has said in terms of squad building, in terms of expectations of the squad going in, also in terms of overarching abilities and the need to put together a squad that understands Desmond's culture and whatnot. So those are, I think, very, very fair comments. Where I depart from Ameenu a bit on the under-20 is, over the past 9 or 10 years, we have treated recruitment into our 20 team as if we are a third-rate country that is putting together a squad. And for me, that has been the bane of our squad. And by that, I mean we have somehow convinced ourselves that the under-20 pool of players is a very small pool. So I take Ameenu Shardow's post, for instance, on Facebook, where he put together the 3 squads. And before the tournament, I had put out a post with the same squad this time, if you remember. And I had said that after the tournament, I will make some points on it.
Yeah.
The squad shows a certain level of consistency and a certain level of loyalty to his core, which again he displayed at this tournament. And I think Kevin raised that point. But I ask myself, is the loyalty to the core justified? I am not a firm believer in being in selecting a junior developmental team, no matter the expectation, the way you select a senior national team. And I think that in that particular age category, the talent pool that Ghana has is so extraordinarily large that to limit yourself to the core that he had was absolutely even bordering on the point of a bit irresponsible. You know, somebody might say it's a bit harsh to use that, but it borders on almost being irresponsible in the sense that some players were off color, some were on color. And this national team, if you look at its history, has always thrived on the concept of nobody is safe. Look, like Ameenu said, I was in the national team camp with Celestete when he was speaking his squad, the squad that won. And everybody can tell you how Samuel Inkum got into that squad over and started playing when Danilo Parry was the darling boy of Real Madrid's Castilla team. Danilo Parry wasn't sitting on the bench at Real Madrid. Danilo Parry was heralded as a certain starter. But he comes into the national under-20 team, is not playing well, is showing attitude. But Bob watches him a couple of times and says, look, go bring me the boy at Kumasi Asante Kotoko. This one, I can't handle this nonsense. And that is how Samuel Inkum's career thrived. But here's the thing. Inkum was playing at a certain level. And I think that Desmond overlooked a host of players in a very large pool who could have made his team very competitive in a very conscious decision to stick with the core, being very loyal to his core, his misbows, his very, his Fenny Dennis Marfos, his Da Costa, his those boys. I think that he could have widened the pool significantly and he would not have lost the quality. Now, on the point of, the boys keep leaving every day, again, I feel it is not really a justifiable excuse because the talent base, the pool in that is extremely large. And your expectation at that level is a national 17, 15, and which is why I'm happy with some of the things that the FA is doing at the base. Because we have a 16 and a 15, we have an under 16, we have an under 17, we have an under 19, I think we have an under 20 or so. It gives you a very large pool of players to pick from. That pool was extremely large. So let me give you an example. When Misbah made the squad, he made the squad as the top scorer in Division 2 football. You can correct me. The first time Misbah made the under 20, that was when Still Believe qualified to the Premier League. His form was to Division 1. Mm-hmm. His form was incredible. Mm-hmm. Nobody complained. In the season since, Misbah has not scored 10 goals in Division 1 in the Premier League in 2 seasons. Now, in this same calendar window, you go to, let's say, Asanska. Jabir Ibrahim scored 17 goals in 15 games and left this country 2 months ago or so to play, 2 months ago to Estonia to play in their league. He's never been in the squad at any point when he had scored 17 goals in 15 games. The team was in camp when he was in the country. You take Divine Clue. There is, if you look at those who like their data, there is no 18-year-old in this country in the Premier League who has played more minutes in central midfield than Divine Clue of Brecum Chelsea. He did not make the squad. Alternatively, in an alternate universe, how do 18, 19-year-old, 17-year-old Ghana Premier League players, and I'm not even talking about Division 1, Ghana Premier League players, not even get a shot? I'm not saying make the squad. They don't even get a shot at being observed for them to compete. And then when an official squad list comes out, you see persons who are playing. I'm saying, look, and no matter how talented you are and you are playing in Europe, you can, if you are playing in Real Sociedad C, I am taking the person who's playing the Ghana Premier League over the person who's playing in Real Sociedad D. The person is not playing Real Sociedad A, he's not playing B, he's playing C. There is no way that talent scope overcovers a consistent Ghana Premier League performer if they're in the same position. So my only issue with the squad, again, was the unwillingness to expand the squad, the really destructive sense of loyalty for me to a squad that had not grown. And here's the thing. When you pick, again, I heard back to the point Kelvin was making. When you are looking at under 20, again, you look at upsides. Even though you are mixing the need to qualify for the World Cup, you're also looking at upside. You look at the squad that went to this tournament and you ask yourself, in 2 years, who is transitioning to the national team? Who gives you the confidence that in 2 years, with maybe Jerry minus Jerry, and even with that one, I can make a very good argument, but this is not the place for it. Okay, but minus Jerry, who are you projecting to become a formidable player? Those are the things that we've kind of forgotten about in this whole process, and it's the one part of the process that I think we need to get back, expanding the pool, and not necessarily relying on a core, whether they perform or not, or if levels have dropped. Let us understand that some of the levels dropped. for some of these boys, but we still took them there anyway, simply because they understand Desmond's method. Understanding Desmond's method, if you're out of form, no matter how much you understand the method, you will not be able to perform.
Interesting point, Godfred. So finally, before I let you go, what should be the way?
Before you let Godfred go, I think what effectively is saying is for us to expand the percentage of players in squad composition.
Yeah, he was saying that we should expand
and are playing regularly.
Yes, players who are performing and are playing regularly. Yes,
I think I agree with Godfred to the extent that I don't think we expanded enough that percent, but there were traits of those kind of inclusion. For instance, Ismailado, Heart of Lions, for me is the revelation of the tournament. For me personally, even though he didn't play much in this Under-20 tournament, but he was never part of the process.
Okay.
And he had the opportunity to come. And for the few times that he played, I saw an exceptional player whom, if we groom properly, we look at the development very well. It could be. So Godfrey was asking about who could be the prospect. I'm saying Ismailado could easily be a prospect based on what I saw. So what Godfrey is saying that he's saying effectively is we should have more of the Ismailado types who were never part of the process.
Yeah, more options.
Yeah, more of them. But you see, that's also another difficulty. Godfrey, it's extremely difficult to and that's why I will understand this one to a certain level. It's extremely difficult to expand that percentage because of his clear intent of keeping a certain level of consistency. And in fact, in this tournament, that consistency was good enough for me. It was good enough to qualify for the World Cup. For more than they displayed, he just missed the target. And we are all having this discussion because we've missed the target. But what if he had qualified for the World Cup by keeping true to his principle, which I think is the best way anyway? But then, that's the dilemma coaches face nowadays. To keep with the core group, or you expand that wild card percentage in squad composition. It's a dilemma that I don't have. I would rather err on the caution or on the side of keeping rather than expanding that. For me, that's personally my point on that.
I get you, Ameenu. What I will say though, I think that when we talk about pool expansion, look, I agree with keeping the core, because when you have that core or a spine that runs through, you have players you've worked with from day one till now. Everybody understands each other. The chemistry builds from there. But at least when you are trying to put a final squad together, I guess you have to weigh the players I know versus the players who are in form and are playing well. Because my assumption is that the technical level or the technical knowledge might be just about the same level. But if a player is in form, it's easier to rope him in and get him to understand your methods far quicker than a player who may be out of form but understands your methods. You get the 2 points.
I don't disagree at all. I'm saying that these are the two schools of thoughts. And as a coach, and knowing Desmond and in his position, you always go for consistency because of that is his overarching principle.
Consistency.
Majority of his players will come from players he's known his way before that, and I think it has served him well up until this point. And even at this point, it's very, very debatable because they didn't make the World Cup, but I think this was a better Under-20 than the last one that even won the Under-20 in 2021.
Which
so for
one?
me,
Zito's Under-20?
Yeah, I think this team played better football than Zito's team. That won the competition. So it tells you clearly not necessarily.
I mean,
no, that's
really, because I think I would disagree with you on this point, but maybe we can debate that on another day.
It's an opinion. It's just an opinion.
That's fair. Based on your own observation, okay.
I think this team played better football than the team that won the competition. So, and we know very well that not necessarily the best teams in tournament win or progresses.
That is also true. That's also true.
So, I think by and large we've achieved something really, really big by putting together a group of players that I think if we are able to track their development well, we could get something out of them.
At least on that score, you've made your point that we should not go back to our old ways. We need to look at this score and see where we can take them.
Yeah, but on evidence of what I've seen so far and the fact that we don't seem to have changed, I fear about the progression of this team, because the alternative route, aside qualifying for tournament to help your players develop and grow, is very, very expensive.
Okay.
It's very cumbersome. It requires a lot of resources. I don't see us within the next 2-3 years committing that level of resources to keep this team going for us to reap that dividend that we want, especially having not qualified for the World Cup. So we need to have a whole discussion about how we construct our team and move away from being heavily reliant on competitions. Competitions are very, very good in developing your players. But it has become clear, especially in the last 10 years, that we've not been able to reach tournaments or competitions. By that means we don't have good players.
Okay.
Where maybe we should start looking at doing the heavy lifting, where it requires a lot of work and a lot of resources.
All
and
right.
I think that it should be having.
I see. Ameenu, thank you so much. You've given us a good hour of your time. Epson, you wanted to ask a question?
No, yeah, I wanted to ask Ameenu a question, but I think after Godfred's submission, he's done justice to the question I wanted to ask. Yeah.
Let me conclude with Godfred, and then we can take the conversation.
Is he gone?
No, Ameenu is still here.
Okay,
let me just take concluding thoughts from Godfred. I don't know if Ameenu is on. But Godfred, if you can hear me,
yes, I can.
Great. Where do we go from here? Ameenu makes a point that we have this habit, and all of us, when we do this work to a point, we have a habit of always discarding the teams that do not get to, say, a World Cup, and we want to move on to the next collection of hot shots and all of that. What do we do with this squad? Is there something we can weave out of this team? And if yes, how should we do that so that in the next few years, these guys can move up the ladder and become the next set of Black Stars players?
I don't. For this squad, I don't see it. That's the point I was trying to make to you.
Okay.
For those of us who always watched our junior national teams, look, it's not about discarding. Football is a mass product. Footballers are a dime a dozen. You can get a footballer in every corner of Accra, in Kumasi, if you want. You understand? You make progress based on your own personal development. So if you get called up to an under-20 squad and your career stagnates, how do we cannot automatically transition you simply because you were part of a national team. A national team is not a club side. And you spend 90% of your productive season with a club side. You understand? So It is eventually what you do at the club that keeps you in the frame for a national team, which is why it gets back to the point of, let us, when it comes to the under-20 level, stop this concept. And that is what has, I think that is for me ultimately what has killed us. We've fallen back on a squad building strategy that is good for senior level football, but it's not good for a country with the talent depth of Ghana. Because what it means is that no matter how talented you are at 17, 18, if you emerge, nobody is paying attention to you simply because the coach wants to maintain a core side for 2 years. Meanwhile, the core side that he has perhaps might not be the best squad available, might not be the most informed squad available, might not even be the best talent that is available. So I'm simply saying that, look, for us to do well, for us to get to the tournaments, it is the talent that will get us to the tournament. No matter at under 20, under 17, no matter how well you coach them. If your talent pool is limited, you can coach them as hard as you can. They will still be limited. Yeah, I was looking at this Desmond squad and I asked myself, so in a very tight spot, he looks at his bench, who is he calling? And even as general football observers, who in the squad, you talk about this, I'm asking, if I were to ask you, Nathan, you have a keen eye for making projections based on what you've seen. Mm-hmm. Who are you projecting to be a world beater in the squad? Football, no matter how scientific it has become, is still an eye test game. Yeah. Fans should be able to point 4, 5, 6 players and say, these ones are the ones that are the likeliest to transition in the next 3 or 4 years. Not the likeliest to win us the under 20, the likeliest to transition. And that has always been what we sought out to do. Which squad transitions best? We've failed to transition the last 3 or 4 squads simply because the last 3 or 4 squads have been the same. Let's carry out a simple exercise on the goalkeepers and then I'll wrap this up. Mm-hmm. So the last, we had Said Yakubu in the squad and then we brought in Gideon Sesiako. Yeah. And we brought in Patrick Arthur from Insupon Fidelity. Now, when we went to the Wafu, let's start from the Olaf. Said Yakubu was in goal when we went to Olaf games. Mm-hmm. By the time we got to the Wafu, he was in horrible form. He was displaced by Young Apostles goalkeeper, Benjamin Chum. Now, Chum leaves, so Chum became number 1.
Yeah.
when the team qualified in October. This is October. Then Chum leaves Young Apostles to Kumasi Asante Kotoko, where he's their third choice goalkeeper now. But he's still there. And suddenly he drops out of the team. The goalkeeper that he displaced, who is also not getting minutes, makes the squad. Gideon Sesiakun, who hadn't made the previous squad, makes this squad as number one based on his current form, right? And then Patrick Arthur suddenly emerges out of nowhere at the expense of the goalkeeper who 7 months ago was your number one. Think about it.
Yeah, but that goes to the heart of what you said all this while. You are advocating for us to pick players who are in form, and yes, can do a job. So if you are keeping true to that principle, which I think sometimes you need to relax that principle based on a certain department and say based on the particular player, that it should be specific based, not a blanket principle throughout. Yeah. And that has arguments. Your argument on your contrary is that for you, pick the players who are playing well at the moment and go and deliver for us. And then out of that, we can see prospects out of it. I disagree with that principle, not in its entirety. I'm saying be specific with application of that principle. Look at the player, look at the department, and look at the alternatives, and then you can run that principle based on these factors.
Godfred.
Yes. I heard Ameenu. So I'm saying that we are on two different sides of it. But the point I'm making is be consistent with the decision making. If Gideon Sesiako's current form means he suddenly becomes number one, what about the current form of others? But why then? What are the other factors that mitigate against other players who are in current form then? Do you understand?
So that's the point I'm making throughout. That principle cannot be applied blanketly. If the weather.
I'm not saying so.
Specifically, it should be individually based. That principle is well and good, picking players on form and all that. But I don't think in squad construction, I've not seen this anywhere where you can run one principle throughout. They look specifically because in football, every day, things are changing all the time. So you can't necessarily use one principle to construct your team throughout. It's never done anywhere. You look at the specifics.
It is not. I mean, hold on for me. Hold on. It is not done. It is not done in but
you look at the player. Look at the alternatives that are available to you. You look at the level of expertise that the player brings to you, and then you make it. For me, that's the best approach. I think to a large extent, Desmond achieved this with this squad.
Yeah, Godfred, would you want to give a response to that? You wanted to make a point.
Yes, the point I'm making is, by and large, of course, nobody says take 11 players who are just. But how then do you maintain the squad's competitiveness? Again, you see, I think that this is not the Black Stars of Ghana. This is the under-20. You are expecting to give a certain player a certain edge. You are expecting the player to play with a certain mindset. There is no top-tier country that gives a 17-year-old developmental player in this national setup, a 19, 20-year-old, the feeling of you can always play, no matter your form. So you have to, even the psyche of the players must always be, I need to be at a certain level to make the squad. That is where then the talent and the consistency comes together. But unfortunately for us, and that is not on Desmond, a lot of the squad members outside of the national team setup, because the point I made to you is key. The boys don't spend all year round playing for the Black Satellites. Most of them play at their club sites. Now, if the talent is not growing well at the club sites, you are not competitive there. Unless the talent is extraordinary, what exactly am I relying on? What exactly am I relying on to make that call? And I'm saying we've seen several examples of those. And the talent base at the under-20 level, for me, and this personal, is way too large in this country. Sometimes, I was telling somebody, these days we pick our under-20s and 17s like a limited country, like Chad is picking an under-20 team, or Niger is, like they don't even limit themselves the way we limit ourselves these days. Like our talent, we must admit that we really, really have constricted the base of how we collect, we call up the 20 boys, the 17 boys, the 18 boys. We need to expand it. I think Desmond is a very good coach. I think that he has very clear ideas. You need very clear ideas on talent development at this point. But I also think you need an open mind. And I think sometimes he hasn't shown enough of the open-mindedness to talent, which is why we end up with scenarios where players for the past 5 or 6 years keep emerging outside of the national team cycle. And Ameenu also will agree with me that it raises questions when a country's major developmental tool becomes, where did this player emerge from? It used to be rare that 5 or 6 players will emerge in Europe and they would not have played in a national squad. These days, we can do, Kevin and those who do the players based abroad, they do all kinds of things. By the end of the year, somebody comes and they're like, this boy, he was at In God We Trust. Oh, this boy was at Taking Over. And then suddenly he's playing at Real Madrid. He's playing by Bayern Munich without showing up in any of the national team setups. Then you ask yourself, then where is the base? Talent doesn't just, talent is there. You need to keep an eye on it and then plot its paths. For me, that is all I'm saying. Thank you very much.
Before you go, like for before you are, in wrapping up, I love engaging Doctor on this issue. You can tell. The thing is that if you are keeping true to your principles, for instance, a player like Abdulaziz Issa, Hakim Suleimana, Aaron Isel, Emmanuel Mensah, and then I think one more player to a large extent wouldn't have been in this squad. But they were in this squad, and even though they didn't play to the highest potential that we know of them, basically because they emerged as one of our top performers. So
but then hold on for me. Let me ask you, what is the benchmark? Hold on. Hold on for me. Hold on for me, if you don't mind. Let me ask you. Let me engage you. Let me ask you a question.
Perhaps you see the direction I'm going. So if this team was brilliant of this players, I don't think this team plays better football at this tournament in the first place for us to acknowledge that this team perhaps plays something. Without these players, I don't think we do that. But here is the case where, like I'm telling you, your rule, even though it's good and it brings a competitive edge, which I agree, which I think there should be a percentage of that. How much of it is where I think where we differ. A player like Shardow, like I said, for me was the revelation of this tournament, and I think he could be a good star. And there are a number of them that we can pick points, even though you seem to struggle to see them. But I'm saying that we can't apply this principle throughout in squad construction. You'll be caught in a web of always trying to bring in new players, and that's what Raymond keeps speaking against: cohesion. And I don't think cohesion was a problem in this group, largely because Desmond was determined to keep a certain core throughout, which he did, and I think that metamorphosed into the kind of football, exciting football to some level, even though some of the players didn't live up to their fullest potential. But we had something to rave about.
Let me just ask you this. You see, here's the thing. We seem to be content with the level. I'll ask you something, Ameenu. When Aaron Isel last season, for the past 3 seasons, I love Aaron Isel. I thought he was basically one of the best young defenders in the league before he went to Heart of Midlothian. Before he went to St. Johnston.
Yeah.
In St. Johnston, the past 6 or 7 months have been really bad for him. He's in the USL now, is he not?
Yeah,
that means that's a drop. Hold on, that's a drop from playing top flight Scottish League football to playing second tier football in America. Abdulaziz Issa was primarily the best club player in Confederations football last year on the African continent. It wasn't a fluke at the time. He was the best single-handedly. Nobody was going to debate it. Look at the level he's at now. We can take Suleiman's brother Hakim. He has played 56 minutes this entire season. 56. No matter how talented you are, 56 minutes is not an indication of somebody who. So you can come and contribute. And when you say, they came and they did well, We have seen some of these players at their best before. This was not Aaron Issel's best. So if this is not Aaron Issel's best, why should we be satisfied with the Aaron Issel who was consistent, is talented, but whose form has dropped so much so that even his reputation has dropped? Why should we be satisfied? That's the point I'm making. He came and he did well, but last season, he was doing so well. He was a starter in the Scottish League. Now he plays in America's First Division.
Yeah. I think this point will continue to disagree till eternity. But I think one point that I want to address before we go off is the point about how do we track and do development aside players going to competitions. And Goffert was suggested at a point in time that it's even though it's largely dependent on the individual player himself and how he progresses. I think countries have shown a way. Germany, Japan, Colombia, Switzerland, they've shown a way of continuously investing in their youth, and even England at some point in time. But it requires a lot of funding. So, for instance, with every FIFA free dates, whilst their A team are engaged in either qualifiers or friendly matches or whatnot, they put investment into also arranging such camps and friendly matches or whatnot, or even they set up or they organize tournaments for their age teams, and it helps build. And I think we always shy away. Yes, we always shy away from doing that because, like I said, it costs a lot. It costs a lot and a lot of resources, a lot of logistics go into a lot of planning. And I think we should be gearing towards thinking about things like that now, because we are always not going to qualify for AFCONs. We are always not going to qualify for World Cups, but we always have talent. So what do we do with the talent? We should start thinking about that.
All right. Shadow, I understand this, but I don't think that we should always have international friendlies for some of these young sides. Lai played with Right to Dream, and they gave him a very good test. He built his team around. We have some of the best, lower division sides in the country that we can arrange for, these young or youth teams when we are building up the squads. And then they can play to be very much competitive.
I'm just giving an idea.
Exactly. And now I think
we can choose a team side, a club side, or a national team side. The idea is, how do we keep our youth teams engaged?
Yes, maybe it behoves on the GFA too. If the Ghana Man Soccer Center of Excellence can be greater, then I think that it would help, because that transition of the under 17 team that played under Lai that failed to, we could have moved a number of them into this team, and then this one could have had a very good time with them, and then at least pick one or two. For me, if we make players feel they are big enough, and then we cannot do with them when it comes to these lower levels, then we continue to fail. How many times has Ofori McCarthy and Aaron Issel not played and under 20 level? They are showing signs of no progression after over 4 years or 3 years. How then do we still keep giving them the opportunity to come and experiment with the team? Jerry every year we know was in a very tight situation. Nobody can tell us that we had no options in any of our lower divisions who could have performed better than Jerry or given us better. You could clearly see that he was frustrated, he was not getting the returns and all that, all because he feels he's at a bigger level and the concentration is too big. If an entire Black Stars could do away with Lai, Steven Appiah and the likes and perform, we could do away with the talent of Ismail Yate and win the Under 20 World Cup and African Cup. We can do away with some of these players and build a very great team for the future.
Which has not been answered. We keep saying we could have looked at other alternatives. Who are those alternatives?
So many alternatives. Arafat and the likes, Kelvin and Nkrumah. The coach abandoned all these guys.
Godfrey mentioned
even though I think Arafat should be part of the squad.
Exactly.
Yes. But Arafat is literally in the same bracket of Aziz Issa. Arafat, since he moved to New Zealand, how many games has he played there? Track it. But I think he's good enough to be in the squad anyway. That's my personal opinion. But I'm saying that the names that you are mentioning, they fall in the same bracket anyway of what we are trying to fight. So we are going in circles. So that's something that when you are building a squad, even though that competitive, I agree with it perfectly. It's about the percentages you allocate to these blocks in building your team. And to a large extent, I think the overriding factor for me personally is to go with consistency, which by and large just want to achieve, And I think that translated in the way they played. And then also bring in these wild cards that I have identified, one, for instance, in Ishmaeladu. You understand? Yeah. I think where we differ is how broader wild cards, or how many more wild cards should we bring into it?
How many extra options?
But Ameenu, my final question before you go, but even before I get there, talking about organizing competitions for these players, we saw Ketokreku lead this under-20 team to Germany, and we're shipped 5. These same players, we saw them.
Yes,
these same players. We saw them.
I think it's one. Yeah, it's one thing that we should keep encouraging. But I'm saying that trip alone, if I tell the number of resources that was sunk into it, even though it was largely sponsored by our host, we had also on our side. And I'm saying we should do more of these things, more of this level of exposures, more of these engagements has a way of building our players beyond competitions.
Right.
But it costs a lot. So I think that's what.
So, but before you go, my question. You have ears around the team. And I've had the issue of motivation. The players were not well motivated. There were issues of per diem delays and all, per diem not being paid. I don't know how true these are, but you are close to the team. Have you heard anything like that around the team?
No, the team was challenged on several fronts, and I will encourage people like yourself and Kelvin to go into them. I don't think in my position it would be right for me to be speaking openly against.
Okay, sure.
That's
I will
fair.
encourage people to go to it. I think the team even did so well considering, and I keep hearing the challenges by day, but of course we are all disappointed that we didn't make the qualifier. I think also a lot of things went wrong that on the management side of things could have been addressed, and I think it's something that we should look into.
All right. Thank you so much. But please tell Desmond and Chris and Fatal that if they are handling under 20s and then they are playing football and they miss one penalty shootout, or we are down by 2 goals and the entire team looks down from the bench, it's bad. It's terrible.
I'm with you on that. I agree perfectly.
Yeah. All right. Ameenu, thank you so much. You've been extremely generous with your time this morning. We really appreciate it. So I'm sure we'll talk again soon.